What's up guys, JV2017 here, and I am bringing you a new Fallout 4 tips and tricks video. And today we are continuing my character build series with genius playboy philanthropist turned superhero Tony Stark, or better known as Iron Man. Honestly, this has been one of the most fun builds to create and play around with because it really makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of mechanics in the game that lend themselves very well to an Iron Man build, so it just felt natural. Additionally, I think there are two main ways you could go with this build. Either you could make a super smart, super charismatic Tony Stark, or a super smart and super deadly Iron Man focused build. I made the decision pretty early on to go for the latter for more of an offensive build while sacrificing the charismatic side, so I'll kind of mention that throughout this video. Now before we begin, I do want to point out this is my interpretation of an Iron Man build. I'm sure there are plenty of other ideas out there, so if you'd like to share your version of this character, feel free to do so in the comments below. I tried to strike a balance between being true to Tony Stark, but also trying to make this build viable, fun, and interesting to play in the game, so I hope you all will enjoy. The three traits that I went after when I was crafting my Iron Man build are first that Tony Stark is incredibly intelligent. It's hard to even quantify how intelligent he is. You know, he's made all of this stuff by himself. He's able to craft, suits of armor just by having junk around. He's an incredibly intelligent guy. And so obviously, a lot of the perks that we're going to be going after are going to be in the intelligence special stat category. So definitely, keep an eye on that. That's definitely a huge crafting point for this build. Additionally, obviously, he has his armor suits. He's got his Iron Man armor, and so we're going to be using the power armor pretty much throughout the entirety of this build. So you're going to be in power armor 24/7 while you're playing through this Iron Man build. Keep that in mind as well. Then finally, he's got his weaponry, and we kind of have to have some wiggle room because we don't have hand blast cannons or plasma beams or whatever the hell Iron Man uses in order to kill his enemies. He's got some rockets and other kind of interesting stuff, so we kind of have to wiggle around with that using some laser guns, some explosives, and things like that with this build. Taking a look now at special stats, our Tony Stark is going to have 3 strength, 5 perception, 1 endurance, 4 charisma, 9 intelligence, 6 agility, and 2 luck. This is a 30-point build, which includes the 1 perception bobblehead early on in the game and the extra point from the special book and the Soul Survivor's house. So the plan is really to focus on signature perks first. That's pretty much the plan with every one of my builds, especially those that focus on power armor for our Iron Man. And most of the perks we'll be focusing on will come from the special intelligence tree, of course, like I said before, and we are kind of, going for more of the intelligence offensive build instead of a charisma based build. I know Tony has kind of a history with alcohol. There's even a whole comic on, an Iron Man comic based on his alcoholism, but we're really not going for that in this build. If you wanted to incorporate that, I would just take a little bit out of agility and maybe perception and put those into charisma to get party boy, if that's what you're going for. Our signature perks for Iron Man are going to be armor, awareness, science, robotics expert, and finally nuclear physicist. So we're going to take a look at each of these individually one by one in the perk chart right now. Starting us off is armor, and armor makes perfect sense because, Tony Stark's always messing with his Iron Man suits. He's got a billion of them, and the fact that he can mess around with the armor and make those modifications, it makes sense from a role-playing standpoint, but it also makes sense because we want to mess around with our power armor. So with each rank, you'll get an additional set of armor mods, and the 4th rank especially is important because you'll need it for the jetpack, or you can get it through playing through a certain faction story. I'm not going to spoil that for you guys, but you can get a jetpack another way if you don't want to invest in this. But if you're playing Tony Stark and Iron Man, I think armor is a great signature perk. At least it is for my build. Moving on, awareness makes total sense because, of course, Tony is looking through his kind of visor, at least in the movies. That's the way it's represented. He's looking through kind of the 2 eye holes that he has, and he's got a computer system. It's all advanced, and he's able to scan certain enemies out in the world. And I think that makes perfect sense, especially VATS makes total sense within Fallout 4 for an Iron Man character, and awareness makes even more sense. He's able to scan certain enemies out in the world, find out their resistances, and take advantage of them. And that makes total sense, especially if you watch the Iron Man movies, so awareness is super important as well. Moving down to science at intelligence 6. So with each rank of this, you're going to get an additional set of mods for your energy-based weapons. And since we can't really, emulate having the hand blast cannon that Iron Man has, at least in the movies, and then kind of, plasma beam based weapons. We don't really have any of that. I mean, you can't really modify that onto power armor. So really, to emulate that, we're going with energy weapons with the playstyle. So it just makes sense to go with science. And also at the last rank, level 41, that's what you need in order to get the jetpack, like I said. So you need both rank 4 of armor and science in order to get the jetpack at level 41. It's quite an investment, but once you're up there, it's totally worth it, especially worth it for, an Iron Man character like we're playing. Moving down, we have robotics expert. This again makes total sense with Tony Stark. He's always messing with this high-tech stuff, and it is robotic. And so I think this makes sense, especially from a role-playing aspect. And of course, you can do some really cool things with this. You can hack into robots and pretty much do the same thing that you could do with Wasteland Whisperer and Animal Friend. And so you're able to, incite robots to attack, do certain things for you, initiate self and, destructs, and also give specific commands with the last rank way up at level 44. So I think this is totally something you guys should invest in for your Tony Stark Iron Man build. Finally, we have Nuclear Physicist. This is playing off of our power armor even more. So Nuclear Physicist, at least in this game, allows you to gain bonuses with fusion cores for your power armor. And then also you get some extra stuff with radiation weapons, which are not my favorite, but you could take advantage of that if you wanted to. So each rank is going to give you 25% longer with your fusion core, 50% more damage with radiation weapons. And then of course we have the same thing with rank 2. And then finally at the last rank, fusion cores can be ejected like devastating grenades. And then of course our fusion cores last twice as long, which is even, a greater boost. It's a jump from rank 2 to rank 3. So investing heavily in Nuclear Physicist is super important for this build, and it definitely makes sense for our Iron Man. Now we're looking at some additional perks that either make sense for Tony Stark or just help out with this build with Iron Man. So I think you guys should pick and settle with one offensive gun-based perk. So that's going to be Rifleman, Gunslinger, or Commando. I would really recommend Rifleman or Gunslinger. The beauty about laser guns is that you can actually change the stock and actually, choose whether you want it to be a rifle or a pistol. And so I went with Rifleman, as you can tell, and really with each rank of these perks, you're going to get 20% more damage with that specific kind of weapon, and these are non-automatic. As I've said before, I'm not a big fan of automatic weapons. I think it's a waste of ammo, and so I would go with either Rifleman or Gunslinger. Either one, it doesn't matter, just pick one of them, and you'll get some extra incentives with, each rank, and they become very powerful, and you kind of want to get a go-to weapon. As I'll mention later in the video, we have some signature weapons that you should definitely think about. So pick one of these and then go forth with your build. Demolition Expert is something I think that kind of augments this build. We don't have like rockets or anything kind of explosive that we can actually shoot out of our power armor, kind of like, Tony Stark has with his Iron Man armor. And so I think Demolition Expert kind of fills the void with that. You'll get some extra damage with, explosive weapons, which is pretty cool. And you get some other cool kind of things with Demolition Expert. So definitely think about this. Another recommendation is Cap Collector, and this is purely because Tony Stark is a billionaire. He's incredibly rich, he's incredibly smart, and he has a lot of money, and so you would think he has a lot of caps in Fallout if you're role-playing him, and so Cap Collector makes sense from that point of view if you want to go for that. Lady Killer also makes sense for Tony Stark. I think he is a charismatic character. As I mentioned earlier in the video at the very beginning, I didn't really go for a charismatic build. However, I think Lady Killer makes sense. It's only at 2 charisma. It's not too much of an investment to get it. I mean, we already have, 4 charisma? And really the only reason I left us at 4 charisma is because I didn't want to put Tony Stark at too low charisma. That doesn't make sense. He's charismatic enough, and Lady Killer makes sense. You get some extra dialogue options and a little more damage against female characters in the game. Moving on, Gun Nut is something I also kind of slightly recommend, only if you don't want to go out and get a laser weapon early in the game. It may help you for the first 10 levels if you're finding trouble. However, my recommendation for a signature weapon should alleviate that problem really easily. So Gun Nut is really a toss-up. It's up to you guys and what you want to use in terms of guns with this build. Hacker makes total sense for Tony Stark. He's always on a computer. He's talking to Jarvis. He's always typing stuff. He totally would be able to hack into terminals. So I think this makes sense. It's also helpful to get into certain areas for extra fusion cores, which is something you're going to need with this build since we're power armor only pretty much. So Hacker makes total sense with Tony Stark. Scrapper also makes sense. I can't remember which Iron Man movie it was, but he pretty much made a suit out of nothing, out of junk. And so Scrapper makes total sense, being able to get some extra materials out of, breaking stuff down. And so Scrapper again, makes total sense. I mean, you'll need some stuff to make some power armor mods because you're definitely going to be messing around with your power armor plenty with this build. Chemist is something I kind of threw in here as well. I didn't take it, as you can tell, with my level 41 Iron Man character. I just threw this in there because we're already at Intelligence 7. If you want to take advantage of drugs, it's a really powerful perk, but it doesn't really make sense for Tony Stark. He's more of a drinker than a drug taker, at least from what I know. And then Action Boy is over here. I would definitely take this because it's great in groups of enemies. If you encounter a lot of enemies, especially on survival, you'll regenerate more action points, or actually you'll just regenerate them faster, not more faster, but just faster. So you'll get 25% with the first rank and then 50% with the next rank. Next, Fortune Fighter kind of goes along with Cap Collector. So if you want to take, either one of these or both of these for more caps, that's something you should think about, especially since he's a billionaire. And then finally, Scrounger is almost hugely important. I mean, I almost put it in the signature perks, but I think it's really important because we want to have enough fusion cores. So I would almost lump this back with the signature perks, but I already recorded that. Basically, Scrounger is hugely important. I think you should absolutely take Scrounger with this build to make sure that you have enough 1, fusion cores, and 2 fusion cells for your laser guns. Now that we have all those perks in our minds, let's talk about our perk roadmap, which is pretty much my term for the game plan for the first 10 levels of the game. What are the starting perks that we're going to go with to kind of establish a play style? And I think this is a very good starting point for our Iron Man Tony Stark. So first off, I would go ahead and take Nuclear Physicist. You want to make sure and make the most of those fusion cores early on in the game as soon as possible. So that's kind of the primary function for this build with Nuclear Physicist, having those fusion cores last longer for you. So I think it's great to adopt that playstyle early. Also, we get our first power armor very early, in the Preston Garvey, Conquered kind of, Deathclaw part of the game. So that's going to be something we need to do very early in the game. Next, I would go ahead and take Scrounger at level 3. This is going to give you, again, additional fusion cores from certain boxes, and also, you're going to get some more ammo that's going to be helpful, especially when you get your laser gun and kind of establish your playstyle early in the game. Next, I would go ahead and get armor just to kind of mess around with power armor at level 4. That's going to be something helpful early in the game as well. Next, I would take your gun perk. So again, that's going to be, Commando, Gunslinger, Rifleman. Again, I would just kind of recommend Rifleman or Gunslinger. Those are the more powerful ones. You can really kind of mess around with whichever laser gun you settle with. Make it a, pistol or a rifle. Pick that one perk that you choose. Again, I probably would say go with Rifleman, but you can take Gunslinger if you want, and then just go from there. Next, at level 6, I would go ahead and take Science. We just got our gun-based perk, and we're going to need Science in order to make sure that it's either a pistol or a rifle, and also boosted damage, get some other incentives and bonuses with our weapon. So Science allows us to do that with laser-based weapons, plasma weapons, all of those kinds of weapons. So that's something important to take early on. At level 7, I would go ahead and take Awareness. I mentioned early on, or I think in my perk explanations, that awareness kind of lends itself to Iron Man. He's able to scan kind of the environment, see what the resistances of enemies are, see their level. That's super kind of, role playing, and I think it's helpful overall in the game. So take that early as well. At level 8, you can go ahead and take Hacker. You're going to start finding some terminals that need hacking early on in the game, and so Hacker is going to give you that baseline extra hacking level, so you'll be able to get into certain areas for, perhaps more fusion cores and whatnot. That's important early in the game. Next, I would take Robotics Expert, just kind of to establish the playstyle. You're going to run into some robots, and if you take Robotics Expert, it makes sense for Tony Stark, but also it'll be helpful in certain situations, where you are able to, take advantage of a robot, and again, it makes perfect sense. Finally, at level 10, go ahead and take Demolitions Expert. Again, I said kind of, explosives are reserved for more group encounters. When you're fighting 3 people that are clumped together, you can just throw a grenade, shoot a rocket launcher, and, get rid of them very easily. And so Demolitions Expert is definitely going to help you out with that. So if you couldn't already tell, the established playstyle that we're going for with our Iron Man is to always use power armor. Always be in it. Always make sure that you have enough fusion cores so you don't have to get out of your power armor and just be plain Tony Stark. Nobody wants to play as just Tony Stark. Everyone wants to play as Iron Man. At least that's kind of the idea with this build. So always be in your power armor. That's going to give you great resistances. You're going to be able to fight tougher enemies at lower levels, which is fantastic. And then using energy weapons, whether it's, a laser rifle or a laser pistol, maybe a Gauss rifle as your primary weapon is kind of the idea here. Again, we can't emulate the hand cannons, the particle beams, whatever he's got going on, but we can kind of do that with laser weapons and, Gauss rifle, plasma weapons, whatever it may be. So use kind of an energy-based weapon as your main weapon. And then, like I just mentioned, use explosives for groups of enemies, or if you're in kind of an oh shit situation, pull out your rocket launcher and use that. You have Demolition Expert if you're following my perk guide. So that's kind of the idea with the playstyle. Moving on, let's talk about some signature weapons that make sense for our Iron Man. So first and foremost, I think that the Righteous Authority is probably your best, most reliable weapon you can use for this. It's a fantastic laser gun found very early on in the game. You're seeing some gameplay right now of, me going and get it and doing the mission for it. It's very easy, and you also meet one of the companions that I'm recommending for you guys, to use with your Iron Man character. So Righteous Authority is just one of the most powerful weapons in the game. I named it as one of my top 5 favorite or best, in my opinion, weapons in Fallout 4. I named the Righteous Authority. So I think it's definitely something you should go after. The special modifier on it has crits doing double damage, and your crit meter fills 15% faster. So definitely a potent early game weapon to get. Totally recommend it. Also, you could go for the Last Minute, which is a Gauss rifle, which is just going to give you massive amounts of damage. The modifier on it has 50% more limb damage, so if you purposefully aim for an arm or a leg, you'll get that 50% bonus on a weapon that already deals a ton of damage. Additionally, we're taking Scrounger with this build, so you're going to find plenty of ammo for a Gauss rifle, so that's something you should definitely think about. And then finally, I'm recommending the Party Starter as kind of like your explosives, situational kind of weapon. So with the Party Starter, you'll do 50% more damage to humans, which is raiders. A lot of the enemies in the game are humans, so definitely a potent weapon there. Moving on, again, we have our signature appearance. So you may be wondering throughout this video, how am I looking like Tony Stark? Especially at the beginning, you look just like Robert Downey Jr., at least that's what it was going for. I have a few mods installed and a few things from Nexus Mods, so I wanted to share them with you guys. So the first thing I have is Robert Downey Jr. This is just a save game. Someone made the character and then put you right at the beginning of the game, so you can still pick your special and all of that. It's made by Vitone13141. Link in the description below if you want your character to look just like Robert Downey Jr. Again, mods are only on PC, so unfortunately, for console players, we're not going to be able to do this, but you can kind of emulate these similar things, by getting the power armor and whatnot, but it just won't look like that power armor. Additionally, I have the Iron Man power armor mod by Saber Shark, and so this is just a retexture for the XO1 power armor, which is the best kind of power armor you can get in the game, and basically you have to put on the hot rod paint job. So this paint job looks just like Iron Man, it's just retextured, and so it looks just like him when you put it on all of the pieces, and it's literally perfect. So these guys did great job on these mods. Links in the description below if you want to get them for yourself on the PC version of the game. Finally, let's talk about companions. Now, I'll admit I'm not a huge comic guy, so I don't know a lot about who Iron Man rolls with, but I have seen all of the movies. I'm pretty much a filthy casual. And so I would say that Paladin Dance is probably a good idea if you want kind of a sidekick rolling with you. I can't remember the name of the guy. War Machine, maybe? Is that right? That rolls around with Iron Man, Tony Stark in the movies. So you could have Paladin Dance rolling around with you. He's always in his power armor, and you could kind of simulate that. So with Paladin Dance, you get plus 20% more damage against ghouls, super mutants, and synths. Very, very powerful perk to roll around with in the game. Probably one of the most, powerful ones that you can get. Additionally, you could have Codsworth rolling around with you as kind of like your Jarvis. And so with Codsworth, you'll get plus 10 damage resistance against robot energy weapons. So I would say this is especially helpful if you're going against the Institute. If you're attacking them, you'll get that extra damage resistance against those attacks. And of course, Codsworth calls you Mr. Stark. If you name your character Tony Stark, he'll call you Mr. Stark, which is very cool. So you can kind of play off the role-playing aspect of that. Imagine that Codsworth is named Jarvis instead, and you can just venture around with him. So I'd like to know, after watching this video, will you play my Iron Man build? Is this something that sounds fun or interesting to do, something that would kind of liven up the game while we wait for DLC? I think it's fun to mess around with these builds, and that's why I keep making these videos. So I'd like to know, will you play with this, and also, how would you build it? If you were to make a change, maybe you would kind of pursue that alcoholic kind of archetype for Tony Stark and then, put that into the game, make him a little drunk, get some bonuses from that. You could go that way or another way. Let me know what you guys would do with this, and also suggest a new character for me to build in a week from now in a future character build guide. Share all of that below. Alright guys, today I showed you how to make a Tony Stark Iron Man power armor character build in Fallout 4. And next time we will cover more Fallout on my channel, so stay tuned for Fallout 4 tips and tricks videos. If you learned something new, remember to hit that like button, I would really appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe for more unique weapon guides, build guides, and general tips and tricks videos. Talk to you guys next time. Peace.